Well, hey there, everybody. I'm Matt Pierce. I'm your host. This is the Tex-Spective Podcast, where we give a Texas perspective to the world around us, and we try to understand Texas a little bit better. Now, I'm a journalist. I've been doing this for about 20 years, and Texas is my home. But having been traveled and been around everywhere, people always ask me, what's it like in Texas? Well, this is a podcast to kind of help you understand that a little bit better. And today we're going to be talking about the Texas landscape and the Texas population. Now, you're probably listening at this in Europe or Asia or somewhere like that, because that's where we kind of market this to. But I'm sure there'll be a lot of people with some different ideas and points of view. But maybe you're curious about Texas and what the makeup of this great state is. So to understand the perspective, you have to understand the landscape and the people a little bit. And in this episode of the podcast, that's what we're going to get into. Come along with me as we explore the landscape of Texas. Well, you know, Texas is a pretty unique place. It's very unique in a lot of ways. And Texas is one big state, obviously. But it really could be broken down into 5 or 6 much smaller states. Okay. And I'm going to start, and we're going to work west to east. We're going to start out in the west by El Paso, Midland, Odessa, Abilene. That's probably what most people imagine Texas to be. Okay. It's a lot of your flat ranches, a lot of oil field. We call it the patch, the oil patch. A lot of oil patch out there. Cactus, desert, a lot of dry land. It's probably what most people imagine Texas to be from the old Western movies. Okay? And that's kind of what West Texas is. And that leads you over to the Texas Hill Country. Okay, which is a little bit further east, kind of more in the center part of the state. Good people everywhere. I mean, Texans are good people. They really are. Texans are really good people for the most part. They're a little confused, but they're good people for the most part. They don't understand a lot of things. Okay, and it's not their fault. We can get into that in the future episodes. But the Texas Hill Country, beautiful landscape. Absolutely beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place to be. These hills that probably stretch, I don't know, into the sky a little bit, kind of rocky to the more, there's this little place there called Lost Maples, which is a little patch of maple trees right in the middle of Texas. Very interesting place. It's one of the only places on earth that these maple trees grow. And they're in Texas, this very specific maple tree. And I don't guess they've ever figured out exactly why these maple trees grow there at Lost Maples, but they do. And, you know, you have the Guadalupe River. Some people call it the Guadalupe River, but in Texas we just call it the Guadalupe River. You have the Frio River, Garner State Park. Beautiful place. The Texas Hill Country is beautiful. Still a little bit more probably what people imagine Texas to be, and that's part of Austin, okay, which we'll get into in a little bit down the road here in a minute. But heading from the west to the east, you go up to Dallas, right? North Texas. That's what we call North Texas. That's kind of your North Texas money. Okay, a lot of Mercedes, a lot of BMWs, a lot of people. That's money. Dallas is North Texas money. Okay, and that's just kind of what it is. That's kind of the power brokers, if you will. A lot of the power brokers are there. A lot of your who's who of Texas politics come from the Dallas area. A lot of lawyers. So if you want to get sued, go to Dallas. Dallas has a lot of lawyers. But there's a lot of money and a lot of power in Dallas. Just to the west of Dallas is Fort Worth, which is a very quintessential Texas city, okay? They remind us fairly often that they're still part of Texas, and by God, they're not part of Oklahoma. They go to the extreme. I mean, they still run cattle through the middle of the city. I mean, this is kind of the quintessential Texas town, Fort Worth is. And, Dallas and Fort Worth are fairly close together. I mean, probably less than about 50 kilometers away from each other. And there's a few little towns like Arlington and, Irving and places like that in between. But Dallas is money. Fort Worth is more subtle money. Okay? And then you have that. Okay? Then you move into East Texas. East Texas is a little bit different. It's probably where more southern than most people imagine. A lot of pine trees, a lot of African Americans, a lot of whites, a lot of interracial marriages there, which is still, believe it or not, a little controversial in some parts of Texas. It's becoming more and more accepted, but in general, Texans still kind of look at that with like, oh, what? Oh, what? And there's still a little bit of that prejudice there. So East Texas, good people, but there's still a good amount of prejudice that goes on there that they really just haven't quite embraced for a various number of reasons. But East Texas is big in football, very big in American football, which is very big. But you're also likely to see them get involved with basketball too. So it kind of depends a little bit. Then you move on to like Beaumont, which is probably a little bit more like Louisiana than it is Texas. They're more likely to have a crawfish boil than a barbecue on a Saturday afternoon. They're more into the gumbo, and so is East Texas. Their cuisine is more southern with like chicken and dumplings and gumbo and jambalaya, stuff like that. Good food. Excuse me. But yeah, it's very, very different. More like Louisiana, more like the old South. Okay. And then you have Houston, just to the west of Beaumont. Houston's large metropolitan city, a lot of culture. There's a lot of cancer in the Houston area. In fact, one of the best, most renowned cancer institutes, MD Anderson Hospital, is there in Houston. And I figure it's because they have a lot of subjects there, a lot of test cases, a lot of subjects that they can work on there. So Houston is a good place. It's just there's a lot of oil and gas, a lot of industry there, a lot of money, a lot of tech. And Houston is a very interesting place. Cultural. It's one of the largest cities in the country, in the United States. Coincidentally, so is Dallas, and so is San Antonio. And Austin is a very growing place, but that's Houston. Houston is kind of the cancer center, if you will. Okay. Then you have San Antonio, my hometown. Okay. San Antonio is kind of where the Tex meets the Mex. Okay. So very Mexican culture, very old, very unique in a lot of ways. Very colorful city, very bright city. Texas, San Antonio, Texas is a very bright city. Very, very bright city. Yeah. A lot of history in San Antonio. It's where the Alamo is. The Alamo is one of the Spanish missions. Very well known. Very, very well known. The Alamo probably, in addition to the Alamo, you have Mission San Juan. You have Mission San Jose. You have a lot of these different missions there around San Antonio that are very unique, and they give a very unique cultural aspect to the city. A lot of tacos, a lot of burritos, a lot of the Tex-Mex food that you've come to expect, probably from Texas, which is very interesting. That lends a unique aspect to San Antonio. So San Antonio is probably where the Tex meets the Mex. So now that we've got the big cities out of the way, El Paso, I almost forgot to mention the Panhandle. The Panhandle, we always kind of forget the Panhandle of Texas, which is up by Amarillo, which is actually closer to Regina, Kansas than it is to Corpus Christi, Texas. Mileage goes anyway. So, yeah, that's an interesting kind of thing to look at there if you look at that. So, Texas is a very unique landscape, a very diverse landscape. And, so you have El Paso, very far out west. People kind of forget it. Dallas is money, okay? Fort Worth, they like to remind us that they're part of Texas. Houston, a lot of cancer. And San Antonio, a lot of culture. So that's the basics of it, okay? That's the basics, the very, very basics of it. So now, in this next segment, we're going to dive into the smaller towns and the smaller perspective. Let's take a look at that. Hey everybody, it's Matt here, and if you like what you're hearing, consider subscribing, liking, and commenting. We're going to give you a Texas perspective on the world around us and help you understand Texas a little bit better. That's what this podcast is about. We hope to increase your knowledge about the perspective of Texas. We hope to enlighten you a little bit on Texas. So be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. That really helps us out. Be sure to share us with your friends as well. That's what we're trying to do here, is help you understand the Texas perspective of the world around us a little bit. We all know you have questions about Texas. So let's get back to the show. But remember, subscribe, like, and comment, and share it with your friends. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this Texas triangle, okay, and some of the smaller cities around Texas. Okay, so we started off with El Paso, which is Midland and all that area out there. Big Bend, that is more probably what you imagine Texas to be in the movies, in the Western movies. Then you have Dallas money, okay. Then you have Fort Worth trying to remind us that they're still part of the state. And then you have Houston, which is very cultural, but also very full of cancer and carcinogens. And they have MD Anderson there because they have a lot of practice subjects, a lot of test subjects there because of all the industry. And then you have San Antonio, where the culture kind of comes together with the Tex-Mex culture, right? Where Tex meets the Mex, right? So now we're going to talk a little bit about the Texas triangle. So if you draw a triangle, and the very top of the triangle is Dallas-Fort Worth. The very bottom right, I guess, of the triangle would be San Antonio. And then draw a straight line over to Houston, and then draw a diagonal line back up to Dallas. That's the population center. Okay, that's where a majority of the people live in Texas, is along and within that triangle. Okay, so 30-something million people live in Texas, okay? You have probably 75 to 80%, if not more, of the population lives along or within that triangle, okay? The rules that Austin, the lawmakers, try to make, most of the lawmakers, if you think about this, are from Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston, and Austin, okay, and somewhere within this triangle. The rules and the laws that we all have to live by are probably somewhat applicable to the people within that triangle. For people who live beyond that triangle, these laws and these rules don't make a lot of sense, okay? So you have to think of this. If you live in the population center along and within that triangle, then your world view of Texas makes sense. If you live beyond that triangle, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay? The people that live within that triangle are generally extremely narrow-minded conservative. They believe in rules for thee and none for me. Okay? That's kind of the mindset of the triangle. Okay, so now we have the population triangle established. Beyond that, you have places, like Laredo, Corpus Christi, Abilene, Amarillo, Marfa. You have a lot of these places where the mold just doesn't fit. It's kind of like Johnny Cochran. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. Well, that's kind of how the rules are laid out. People within the triangle benefit the most, okay? Outside of that triangle, in places like Corpus Christi, Laredo, even smaller towns like Freer, Texas, or Three Rivers, places like this, very conservative people, Bible belters, very conservative people. Even the Democrats, politically, the blue Democrats, are probably a little bit more conservative than the National Democrat. And we saw that during the last election, or this Senate election here between Beto O'Rourke several years ago and Ted Cruz. Beto was doing really good until he started being influenced by the National Democrat Party. Then he started losing it. Because the people outside of the triangle who identify as left-wing or Democrat are much more conservative than the traditional National Democrat. To the contrary, most of the conservatives, the deeply red people, the Republicans, are much, 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 much more conservative than even the Nationalist Party, the Populist Party, the Populist Republican. But the people, the Democrats and Republicans who live outside of the triangle tend to get along better than the hardcore far left and far right that live within the triangle. Okay? So people outside of the bubble tend to get along a lot better, and they can reach decisions because they understand that they have to live with each other. People within the triangle have the perspective of I will dominate you. People who live outside of the triangle live with the perspective of, man, we're eventually going to have to get along with each other. So they tend to reach better decisions. Now, places like Corpus Christi, Laredo, Marfa, Abilene have a very different perspective of things. These people are just trying to get by. Oftentimes, they don't have access to the best health care. They don't have access to the best education, as do the people in the triangle. These people suffer a lot because the rules and the ideas that these left and right-wing nationalists, these populist parties, the ideas that they have just don't make sense to these people. And rightfully so. So these people are more middle of the road. Okay? There could be influenced either way. Okay? This is where the purple kind of comes in. But in general, people who live inside the triangle have one way of looking at things, and people who live outside of the triangle have a very different way of looking at things. So that's where you have to, within the triangle, you have some of the biggest cities in the country: Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio. Outside of the triangle, you have Abilene, Corpus Christi, Laredo, Victoria, Beaumont, Lufkin, Lubbock. You have all of these larger cities that still have a very large number of people living there. But to understand Texas, you have to understand Texas as two very different places: the triangle and beyond the triangle. And that's really the easiest way to explain it. So if you're looking at Texas from an outsider's point of view, Texas is actually a much smaller place than you think, because the triangle, Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, back to Dallas, they kind of control everything. And then the rest of us have to deal with it. So they make the mess and we have to clean it up. That's kind of the perspective of this. So Texas is a very strange place. High school football is very big in Texas. The American version of football is very big in Texas. and it's a very unique culture. The landscape of Texas is very unique, very independent, but also very, very closed-minded in a lot of ways. So you have to keep that in mind. So when dealing with Texas, consider where the people are that you're dealing with. Are they within the triangle or are they beyond the triangle? And the way that you understand the perspective of this Tex-Spective is understand where people are from in Texas and understand that El Paso is probably a little bit more like California. Beaumont, Houston is a little bit more like Louisiana. San Antonio is probably a little bit more like northern Mexico. And don't forget that South Texas has a good dose of German heritage and Polish heritage as well. So in South Texas, you're equally as likely to run into somebody with the name Kosciuszko or Pruski as you are Gonzalez or Martinez or Jones. Because Texas does have such a strong Polish and German Slavic connection there through our history, which we'll explain a little bit more in another episode. So Texas is not just this Mexican heritage that you think about. Texas is this plethora, this great melting pot. I mean, Panna Maria, Texas is home to one of the oldest Polish settlements in the United States. And people don't normally think that. When you think of Polish, they normally think of Chicago maybe or Pittsburgh, something like that. They don't normally think of little Panna Maria, Texas. But Panna Maria is one of the oldest Polish settlements in the country. And that's what you got to think about with Texas. Texas is a very unique place with very unique personalities and very unique mindset. So think of Texas as a triangle and beyond the triangle. Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, back to Dallas. That's the triangle. That's the population center. The rest of us have to deal with it. That's Texas explained in about 20 minutes. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming along with me. Thanks for being part of this. I know this is kind of a new thing here. Not podcasting is not new, but this is kind of new for me, and I hope you're enjoying it. Please, I'm open to criticism, corrective criticism, whatever. I'm open to hear it. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. I'm open to hearing it. Good, bad, ugly, and different. Thanks a lot. Come along with me next time as we explore the Texas perspective on the Tex-Spective Podcast. I'm journalist Matt Pierce. We'll talk to you again soon. Take care of everybody.